welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering the Grimoire. The Grimoire, which is basically a choose-your-own-adventure that DBD has been doing. And what this is, they're basically just giving the community a chance to make their own chapter, pretty much. There's two parts to this Grimoire. I give up. Let's just call it the book. So, there's two different parts to this book, and the first half is already finished with. So we can go ahead and look at all the choices that the community made and try and figure out what the killer and survivor is going to be for this chapter. Alright, there's 6 verses or choices for each role, killer and survivor, so we're going to look at killer first. Now, I don't want this video to just be me copying what the book says and just kind of reading it to you. I feel like that would just be a waste of your time because you can just do that yourself. And I kind of want to just keep to analyzing, so we're going to skip the little story we got here, and I'm just going to look into the choices that we've made. And if you want to look at the context of it, you can look at that yourself. Alright, killer verse 1. Alright, so this question is basically asking what basic form the killer is going to be. So our options here are grounded, so just like a basic killer, just a normal human being. We've got supernatural, that's something like Vecna, Nurse, something like that. Chimeric, which is monstrous creatures like the Dredge or the Demogorgon. And the option that the community picked, which is otherworldly. And its description here says a maddening, incomprehensible horror from beyond reality. Now that description is really vague, but the few choices that's going to stem from that is going to give us a little more detail. I did say I didn't just want to read through the entire book, but I do want to cover this part here because I feel like it's going to give a little bit of a background to the killer and how they got their power. What foul being do you see staring back at you in the puddle? You try to get a closer look when suddenly your reflection rises from the water and wraps itself around you. Its grip is tight beyond resistance, and you are pulled deep into the infinite water. Your reflection pulls you deeper through this unphysical space. It is too dark to see your malevolent reflection, but you can feel its life force flowing into you, changing you. So it seems like this is the point where they get their power. I might be reading this wrong, but I don't think this killer had any power prior to this. I might be grasping at straws here because we still don't know very much. But based off of that there, and the choices we're given for this path we went down, it does seem like that the entity is going to give the killer its power. Alright, moving on. So the choice we went with on this one is divine. A force of terrifying purity that transcends the material plane. And that brings us to verse 3. What was your reputation among the unworthy souls? And we picked wielder of exalted truths. They said you were beautiful and terrifying, unknowable by your very nature. Just from how that reads, it seems like when they wrote this, they had some kind of direction they wanted to take this. I'm getting the feeling that this killer is going to be kind of like the unknown in his lore, where almost no one knows he exists. And for him, if you start to find out that he exists, he comes for you. They're not going to do the exact same thing. But that would match up with the choices we made for Survivor verse 1, because we ended up going with a touched world, and this reads, in my world, supernatural events are rare, but undeniably real. Most people go their entire lives without witnessing them. So it is starting to come together. We're getting a picture here. Alright, moving away from the story a little bit here, we're getting into developing the killer's actual power. In verse 4, we're asked if the power is going to be about deception, control, relentlessness, or torment. Deception would be like Ghostface or Pig, the stealth killers. Control would be Trapper, Hag. And relentlessness would be the dash killers, the dash slop killers everybody's complaining about. The hillbillies, the Ken Kanekis. And what we went with is torment. So that kind of plays with status effects like the different infections with Nemesis, Albert Wesker, and Plague. And this would also cover like the pig's traps and Sadako's condemnation. So this killer is going to have some kind of status effect or something that the survivors have to deal with in order to not be completely disadvantaged. Now in verse 5 we get this might as well not even be a video, this might as well just be a stutter compilation. Alright, in verse 5 this is about the closest look we can get into what the power is actually going to be. We chose punishing heart, and that says misdeeds will be met with a devastating response. To sin is to suffer. So we just have to figure out what misdeeds are in this context. But I can't really think of anything that survivors can do that would be considered a misdeed. I guess if we're looking at it from the killer's perspective, stunning the killer would be a misdeed. So maybe after they make a pallet stun, then they get hit with that status effect, and then as we will see in the next verse, they have to pray in order to get rid of that status effect. But then when we look at verse 6, it asks whether each sin is unique, all sins are the same, or all sinners are the same. So what we went with is each sin is unique. So this means there would be different ways to get different status effects, if that makes sense. So there'd have to be different misdeeds. So if stunning the killer is one of them, I feel like the only other one I can think of would be blinding, but I don't think they would make a power around the survivors having an item. So yeah, I just don't think we have enough information to figure out exactly what the killer's power is yet. But that's my best guess. That's the closest I can get to a guess. Alright, that's everything we know about the killer, but we still have the survivor to look at. And like we said before, they come from a touched world where supernatural events are rare but undeniably real. Moving on to verse 2, this is pretty interesting here. This might be what the map is going to be. Take this with a huge grain of salt, but it says deep within the fog, you see the hollowed out shell of a once stately manor. The home is in ruins, but the glow from inside is the only light in this darkened landscape. So again, take that with a grain of salt, but it is like the only place in this book where we get some kind of setting. And then in this verse, we're asked what kind of life did he lead? And we picked a life of endless mysteries, undiscovered realities, unexplained phenomena. I seek the truth behind these enigmas. Alright, verse 3 is where we can actually analyze a little bit more, because this is more get an idea of what the perks are going to be rather than just the background of the character. So it asks, how do you try to escape this creature? The 5 different options we had were strength, which would be something like hitting killers with pallets or having buffs while injured, something like that. Logic, which it says creating distance from the killer. Disorienting the killer, so that would be blinding, something like that. Courage, and it says the creature wouldn't expect such a bold move, so that would be stuff and chase. So again, throwing pallets in their face or just anything up close with the killer. And then the one we picked is intellect, and it says you know enough about this creature to survive it. And I'm gonna be honest, who knows what that means? Like, that could literally mean anything when it comes to surviving the killer, so who knows on that? It could be any kind of perk. Now in verse 4, the option we picked doesn't really have a very clear idea for a perk, but the ones we didn't choose do. This option here, Door of the Lone Pilgrim, it says you walk the land helping those in need, your ultimate quest too grave to share with anyone. So that's definitely a healing perk of some kind. But the one we actually picked, Door of the Divine Investigator, it's just, we don't really have a clear direction for a perk. It says you sought out the worst of the collapse and studied ways to reverse its effects. So kind of just like the last one, we don't really know what this is going to be. But just with how that other option was worded, it really seems like this is going to be used to determine a perk. But again, we don't know much. I'm just kind of speculating. The most important part to the survivor's backstory, we're asked, what was your vocation or job in the old world? And we picked spiritual scientist. You applied your passion for the natural world to find empirical meaning in the divine. I wouldn't be surprised if this is just going to be the killer's name in-game, the divine. So you have some kind of scientist that was looking into the killer. Now, I'm also willing to bet that in his backstory somewhere, he's going to do something immoral. So the killer is going to have some reason to go after him, and then that's why the entity is going to bring them both into the realm. Because remember, the killer or the divine is basically like Pyramid Head, where their entire motive is punishing the guilty. And moving on to our last verse, this also seems like it's going to be a question that's going to determine what a perk's going to be. And there's no way it's a coincidence that there's 3 of them that are kind of set up like this. So it asks, which trait defines what you do next? We have objectives, survival, altruism, and boldness. And I actually just realized these are the different blood point categories, so that makes it really obvious what they're going for all of these. And the one we picked is boldness, so it's going to have something to do with interacting with the killer. And yeah, that's about everything. Here's a little recap of everything we know so far. We know the killer's going to be some divine being that's going to be punishing the guilty, and they have to pray in order to get rid of their sin. That's kind of the description of the power we have right now. And in that, there's different kind of sins. We have some kind of scientist survivor that was looking into it, and we know one of their perks are probably going to be helping with up-close interactions. But that's about all we know. We don't really know that much. It says the Grimoire will continue at the end of the year, so we'll know more eventually, and I'll make a updated video on that. But yeah, that's about all we know right now. I hope you found this video a little informational, and I hope you enjoyed this new killer that's coming out, seeing as the community picked it. It'd be funny if the community complained about this killer. It'd be funny if that's the entire reason Behavior is even doing this thing, is just so the community can't complain about what they make. Hopefully they do cook up something good with this. It seems like they have a pretty good theme going on. But yeah, that's everything we know about the Grimoire chapter. Thanks for tuning in, I'll see you in the next one.